this why there's a epidemic of children self-harming? You know, obviously you know about that. There's a lot of children self-harming. Is this because of the childhood traumas or traumas what happened in
Absolutely.
that? Okay, wow,
Absolutely.
wow,
So
recluse.
what the research has found is that if you get hold of some comedians, and obviously it's got to be the kind of comedy you like,
Yeah.
and you develop a little library of your favorite comedians, just the laughter actually triggers good brain chemistry and it can raise your mood. How about that? The second one that also tried to hang himself, I actually rescued him. I stopped him and he was okay. So it was a really positive sort of
Mm,
thing that helped me to save this guy because of the previous experience.
mm. Go.
There we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Ultraviolet Insights. This week's guest, we have Lindsay Smith. Oh my gosh, she's going to tell us all about her journey in what she does. In fact, I'm just going to let her explain it to you. Lindsay, how are you doing, my dear? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing so good. How are you?
I'm fine, Lindsay. I'm actually looking forward to this one. This is more mental. Tell us first of all what you do.
So people call me a mental health practitioner.
Yeah,
And then they go, well, what does that actually mean?
there you
So
go.
I'll explain what it means. So I am a therapist, so I do therapy, but I only do 1 day a week of therapy. My business is doing mental health training and consulting for organizations that look after people who have got mental health problems.
Right.
I also offer consulting to corporate companies to help them to prevent their employees from getting mentally ill. So
Right.
that's in a nutshell what I do.
So how did you get into this?
Well, a very long journey. So as you can see, I've got grey hair, Peter. So I've got a long, long journey. So you can hear from my accent that
Hmm.
I am from Africa, South
Okay.
Africa.
South Africa. Okay.
Yeah. And when I started my career, I started as a nurse and did lots of different courses in nursing. But what started me on this journey in mental
Mm.
health is that I was the lead of an HIV unit in
HIV.
South
Okay.
Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. And HIV, I don't know if you know this, but HIV in Southern Africa is dire, really, really, very, very bad.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Unlike here, so here in the UK, there's probably around 1% of adults that have got HIV.
Mm.
In Southern Africa, there's between 28 and about 45% of adults, depending on which country you look at, that have got HIV.
Okay, 1 second, Lindsay. Let me just cross that off my list of holidays.
Right. No,
That one.
no, no. All you have to do is have safer sex. You don't have to
Yeah,
not
that
go
too.
there.
Yeah, that too. All right. So okay. So you was doing this in South Africa. So
Yeah.
sorry, you're originally from South Africa. You was actually doing and applying this mental health business in South
No,
Africa.
no.
Oh,
I was
right.
running an HIV unit.
Oh, right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I ran this HIV unit, and whilst I was running the HIV unit, that my patients got PTSD from getting an HIV diagnosis. Many of them were depressed. Many of them became very suicidal, and
Uh-huh.
in fact, I had two of my patients that hung themselves. One
Oh,
of which I found. So I started becoming very interested in mental health and the impacts that life has on mental health. So I went and I studied mental health nursing.
mm.
And after running this unit for 11 years, I became so burned out that I left nursing and I went and studied psychology. And
Can I just take you back a bit? One second. You said that you discovered someone who's hung themselves.
yes,
And how did you cope with that?
Oh, it was a real terrible shock. I mean, seeing somebody like that is shocking.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things that I specialize in now is something called ligature management, which is actually when someone places a ligature on their neck to take their lives. So that's one of the things that I specialize in now. And
Okay,
from,
we'll get into that because
yeah,
Jesus, we'll get into that.
from that experience.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So all right. So okay. So you're from South Africa, you did your you studied now to be psychotherapist, psychotherapist,
Yeah.
and so where you at now? What stage you at now?
So when I came over here,
Mm.
then, well, when I left nursing and I studied psychology, I opened my own business in South Africa, and it
Very good.
was for workplace health and well-being. So mental health was one of the things that I introduced to companies in South Africa. So
Mm.
when I came over here 13 years ago, I just continued, but I continued as a consultant, not in my own business. So I decided that I would rather have my own business than work for other people.
Yeah, 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 yeah. As
And
we
so
do.
a year ago, I started my own company, offering exactly the same services, but for myself and not working through other people.
Brilliant. I want to take you back before you actually got into nursing and which one was it?
Psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist. All right.
Mhm.
What did you do before nursing and what did you do before psychotherapy?
Oh, before nursing, I was in school.
That's yeah, I know. But what did you study in school?
Oh, it's very different from here.
Mm.
So in South Africa, you study. I think so long ago, I can't even remember. I think it was 8 subjects.
Right.
Um, and it had nothing to do, we didn't have A level, so it had nothing to do with what you chose to do at university.
Right.
So
Okay.
it was just
Okay.
regular school.
Because the reason why I asked that question, I wanted to know how you got into nursing. What made you say, "Oh, I want to get into nursing"? Then from there into psychology. That's what I
Yeah.
want to know. What led you to the path of getting into nursing?
I know it sounds hideous, but probably because I could study for free whilst working in a hospital.
That's it. That's fine. Okay. So
So
okay.
you do 3 years of general study. So I became a general nurse, what is
Right.
known as a registered nurse.
Right.
And then I specialized in midwifery. Then
Yeah.
I specialized in as a nurse practitioner and worked in the community. Then I studied education, then mental health.
Yeah.
So I have lots of nursing qualifications, but it was
That's
at, yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say to you. So you come from a extremely a knowledgeable wealth of nursing background, and then
yes,
you went into mental
psychology.
health psychology.
Hmm.
My God! And as we discovered, you said you've already seen someone hang themselves, which probably is a traumatic thing for yourself. And what is your coping mechanisms for that? Do you ever get flashbacks of that day, or
I actually don't.
oh wow,
Um, I don't. The second one that also tried to hang himself, I actually rescued him. I stopped him, and he was okay. So it was a really positive sort of
mm,
thing that helped me to save this guy because of the previous experience.
mm, mm. How do you spot someone who's going for mental illness? Is there signs?
Oh yeah, there's definitely signs. So are you talking about how do you spot someone who's suicidal, or how do you spot someone who's got mental health problems?
Either or, or if you could
Okay.
tell me about both, that might be.
So that's a very, very big question. So
Mm.
I want to show you this book here.
Oh
So
wow,
this
okay,
book here
that's,
is
that's
our diagnostic criteria, and
mm,
that's how thick it is. So that's how many mental health diagnoses there are
wow.
in one book.
Mm,
So when you say, how do you spot somebody? I mean,
yeah.
there's so many different diagnoses that you really, really have to assess somebody really carefully before you give them a specific diagnosis. But
Mm,
most people have got more than one. So, like, it's very common to have both depression and anxiety.
And so, is this a series of questions to get the answers, or is it just
Yes.
you? Mm,
Well, it's not like a tick box exercise. You really have a conversation with a person and you ask them, what are you particularly struggling with in your life right now? What would you particularly like help with in your life right now? And as they have that conversation with you, then it will come out usually what the kinds of things that they are struggling with. And that's how you come to a diagnosis. I don't particularly work with, oh, I want to diagnose somebody. I work with, how can I help them to live with whatever difficulties they're having in their lives?
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to go into that. How do you help them?
Well, it depends on what's wrong with them, obviously. So there are 4 things that I always utilize in my therapeutic practice. So the first thing is getting professional help. So that's either getting psychotherapy, so talk therapy, or going on medication. And the medication depends entirely on what the particular diagnosis is. So, for example, somebody who has schizophrenia and psychosis, they would then go on an antipsychotic medication. If somebody has severe depression, then they might be prescribed antidepressants. So it depends entirely on what they are having problems with as to what they would be prescribed. So for professional help, talk therapy, and perhaps medication, and perhaps hospitalization if that is necessary. So that's the first one. Then the second one is social support. So people underplay how very, very important the people around us are. And I don't know if you've heard about that we have an epidemic of loneliness.
No, I haven't, but I actually I've heard a couple of people talk about being lonely.
Yeah. So if you're really lonely, it brings about depression because you've got nothing to live for. You've got nobody who makes you feel like you're loved or important. So I'll tell you something interesting. In 2018, the UK appointed a member of parliament for loneliness. How about that?
For real?
For real?
Well,
Absolutely. And we've got our second one so far. And what the first member of parliament did was he created positions called social prescribers. Have you ever heard of that?
no, but tell us
So,
about it.
yeah. So it's somebody who's usually attached to the GP's practice. So the GP will do your original assessment. And then if they feel like, oh, you've got no social support in your life, then they will send you along to the social prescriber who prescribes a social prescription, which is how to get in contact with people. So they assess you to say, yeah, look at your face. You didn't know that.
Because I'm amazed. How do you get in contact with people? Just go on the internet, go on Instagram, go on social media. There's people in thousands of people. But, so I don't understand.
Well, that shows me it's a really good thing, Peter. It shows me that you have no problem with loneliness.
No, I don't. But people, I know some people that do suffer from that. But
Yeah.
so what's your coping mechanism for that then? How do
For
you get
loneliness.
yeah.
So what the social prescriber would do would be an assessment. Again, they would find out what are your interests. Do you like walking? Do you like art? Do you like singing? Do you like gardening? And then they'll try and put you in contact with groups that will do those kinds of activities. And so
Right.
you will go along to those particular groups and meet like-minded people.
So it's basically about getting the person involved with other people
Yeah,
type thing.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
what's stopping someone from doing that themselves? Why did they have to appoint a social person to do that?
Well, that's what mental illness is about. It's about
Right.
your self-belief. You don't believe that anybody likes you. You don't believe that anybody wants to be your friend. You don't believe that anyone cares about you. And so you're very, very sort of reticent about going and joining groups with that kind of mindset. And then the third thing is about self-support. And I'm really big with this because probably around about 30 to 40 years ago, people started believing that if they were mentally ill, only the professionals could help them. They could do nothing to help themselves. And that's absolutely not true. There are so many things that we can do to help ourselves if we've got depression or anxiety or whatever. So I always include all 3 of those strategies in my therapy. And then if the person is a spiritual person, then we will add spiritual interventions into that as well.
So what are the sort of things that I can do to help myself if I was
Well,
feeling sad? today.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you something for the comedians out there.
Oh wow, yeah, there you go.
There you go. So have you ever heard of this big word called anhedonia?
Hell no.
No. So
No.
what that means is that the person is unable or has a limited ability to enjoy stuff.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so if you think, my friends are inviting me out, I'm not going to enjoy that.
Mm,
It's less likely to make you go out, right?
mm, mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm.
And so because they have this sort of inability to enjoy things, then they withdraw from society and they become more depressed and more depressed. So
Recluse.
what the research has found is that if you get hold of some comedians, and obviously it's got to be the kind of comedy you like,
Yeah.
um, and you develop a little library of your favorite comedians, just the laughter actually triggers good brain chemistry and it can raise your mood. How
Wow.
about that?
It seems like a form. In other words, you know, if someone didn't like, someone was into poetry, you would get them to be with a group of people who like poetry, and therefore
Absolutely.
it
Absolutely. So that's a social
familiar.
perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
familiarity. I get that. So, like I was saying though, how would you manage stress? Stress.
Okay. So everyone who lives in our society has got stress, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So most people don't actually even understand what stress is. So what would you say stress is?
You know, Lindsay, I am so glad you're on here. What would I say stress is? Having to do various things, ain't got no time to do it, trying to fit everything in at the same time, and you get an overlap, you can't do it, you just, you're burnt out. Yeah, and you just feel anxiety, and you just, oh my God, I can't do that. That's, for me, that's stress. Yeah, trying to achieve something, you've got time limits on it, you can't meet the time, the deadlines. That's stress to me. That's stress. And
Okay.
how do I deal with that?
Okay, so that's exactly what stress is. So
Mm,
if we put it in a scientific way, it's too much to do in too little time with
yeah.
too few resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what you've got to do is if you've got too much to do, what can you do with that?
Cut down on the amount I've got to do.
Exactly. Cut down on the amount you've got to do. So
Mm.
you've got to be really, really hard with yourself and you've got to decide like, what are the most important things that I've
Lindsay,
got to do?
are you doing some therapy on me right now? Because I feel like I'm in
You
school.
ask first.
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's the first thing. Cut down on what I got to. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So you've got to really, really look at what are the most important things
Mm.
that you have to do.
Hmm.
So that's too much to do in too little time. So how's your time management?
Is this really on me? My time management? I think it's okay. I
Yeah.
think it's okay. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
schedule things in, and
Mm,
and have certain time to do certain things. So I think my time management's okay.
okay. And then what about resources? So too few resources.
Yeah, that's probably what I would struggle with because I'm a one man band,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's like,
So most entrepreneurs, such as ourselves, are
mm,
one-man bands or they've got a small little group in their little business. And so we're everything. We're the receptionist, the scheduler, we're the expert, we're the finance, we're the invoicer. So we're everything. So it's the world of entrepreneurship is one where we have very few
mm,
resources.
mm, mm.
So outsourcing what you're not an expert at is a good thing for when you have too few resources.
I've taken note. I've
Okay.
certainly taken note.
Now you
Um,
mentioned something really big. You said to me, "Oh, I'm stressed and I'm burnt out." Okay, so stress and burnout are two different things. So
this is the
when you
first
get
time.
burnout,
Yeah.
it means you've been chronically stressed for a long period of time.
Mm.
And so, do you know what the two stress hormones are called?
No, I don't know. Please tell me.
Cortisol and adrenaline.
Oh yeah, okay. I do know that.
Well, you've heard of
I
them.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know.
So when you've been very, very stressed for a long period of time, that means in your body, your cortisol and your adrenaline are at very, very high levels.
Which can lead to
And
other
so your
problems.
body can't cope with that
Mm.
over a long period of time. what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to get a shoot and then a down to relax, and then a shoot and then a down to relax. That's how our body is meant to cope with stress.
Right.
So when it's happened over a long period of time, that's when you become burned out. And burnout means you become totally physically exhausted. You become very, very irritable. And what you previously used to enjoy in your job, you no longer enjoy.
Lack of motivation as well, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Lack of motivation. And you don't enjoy going and doing stand-up comedy anymore. It's just like a job now. And so if you stay at that point of burnout without getting any intervention, then you could move over into depression and anxiety, where it becomes a mental illness.
Right. So how would one control that then? Is it going back to those three things again? The time.
Going back to those three things.
Right.
So let's say you're in a desperately stressful job.
Yeah.
So somebody who's in that terrible, stressful job, if they've got too much to do, they need to go to their upline manager and they need to say, I've got too much to do. You need to give me somebody else to help me, or can you help me make some suggestions? And the time that you're expecting me to do these jobs in is not enough. And then lastly, resources. You need to bring in some more resources. But then it depends on what kind of boss you've got, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. If you've got a boss, that is.
If you've got a boss. So if you've got a really lousy boss that is bullying you, and then it's not so easy to have such a conversation. Then you would have to go to HR to have that conversation.
So Lindsay, I can't cope no more. I just don't know what to do. I'm getting depressed. What are you going to do to help me?
All right. So I'm going to do an assessment. So I'm going to see what is causing your depression. And usually what is causing your depression is the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And the thoughts that you have about that situation. So people that have got depression, if we just look at depression, their thoughts are very negative. And so what we look at is we look at their thoughts, and we look at whether those thoughts are healthy thoughts or unhealthy thoughts. So for example, if let's say I have a fight with my husband, and I have a husband, yeah.
No, I say I hope you haven't had a fight with him. I thought this is hypothetical. Yeah, okay, go on.
Yeah. So if I have a fight with my husband and I come in and I say it's the end of the world, my husband's going to divorce me, he hates me, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to check out, well, how rational is that thinking? Is it the end of the world? Is it the end of the marriage? Or is it overreaction to a fight, which we all have in marriage? And so we would look at the kinds of thinking that the person has. Because when your thinking is negative, what do you think it's going to do to your depression?
It's also bring you to a low as well. Because you're thinking.
So it increases the depression. Exactly. Exactly. So when I help them to think about, well, everyone has a fight, with husbands and wives fight, partners fight. Do you think that there's a way through this? What was the fight about? Are you thinking rationally about it? And as you start asking them the questions, how do you think you can cope with it? What do you think you can do when you go back? So it's just having those conversations and helping them to think more rationally than they are thinking.
So basically, you're changing one's mindset. Is that what? Yeah. And is this something that has to be an ongoing thing? Is there a time limit to it, or is it is it ongoing?
Well, it depends on how many irrational thinking patterns that they've got. So the therapy is called cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive being the mind, and the mind drives the way in which you behave. So if you're behaving negatively, it means you're thinking negatively. So we help you to look at those thoughts. And mostly, I reckon about 10 to 12 sessions will help somebody with a single problem. But if they've got multiple problems, then it's going to take much longer. So which brings me to my next point. Have you heard about something called ACEs.
No.
Not in a pack of cards, ACEs.
I've heard
Like,
of the pack of card aces, but I haven't.
yeah.
You're going to tell me
Okay.
what this means. Ace called.
So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences.
Right.
Have you heard of that?
No, but I've heard something similar. I've heard about someone talk about childhood experience affecting you later on in life, that type of thing.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. So the original research, it's called the ACE study. They said that there are 10 different experiences that children will have that are adverse in their childhood, whilst their little brains are developing, whilst their little bodies are developing. So these 10 ACEs are broken up into 3 different categories. So the first category has got 3 in it. So it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, and psychological abuse.
Okay.
And those children know that they've been abused. Okay. What do you think it'll make them feel about themselves?
Probably terrible, especially if they can't speak out about it.
Yeah.
Closed up, closed in, recluse.
And what's wrong with me? Why are they doing this to me? There must be something wrong with me. So can you see how their thoughts right at the beginning of their lives are set up like that? Okay, so that's the first category. The second category is neglect.
Right.
So neglect is when something is withheld from you. Abuse is when something's done to you. Neglect when something's withheld from you.
Okay.
So the first one is psychological and emotional neglect. So the poor child is not made to feel loved. They're made to feel that the parents wish they were never born. They just get ignored, that kind of thing. So how do you think that child might feel?
What you just said, lonely and depressed. Yeah.
Exactly. And their thoughts would be about, I need to make myself small. I need to hide away. I need to not be in front of this person. And so they'll feel like I'm just nothing in this world.
This is I tell you what, before you do your next point, is this why there's a epidemic of children self-harming? You know, obviously you know about that. There's a lot of children self-harming. Is this because of their childhood traumas or traumas what happened in that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So we'll get to that. Let me finish the 10 and then we'll look at how it works out.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you all the way.
The second neglect is physical neglect. So they don't get fed properly, they don't get cleaned properly, they go to school with dirty uniforms, their house is dirty. If they're sick, they don't get taken to the doctor, that kind of thing. Just neglect. All right, so that's the second category. Now, the third category, there are 5 in there. So that is if there is fighting within your family and lots of domestic violence and abuse going on. If any of your family members, and we're talking about in the household, not not extended family. If any of the family members have been put in jail, if any of the family members are addicted to drugs or alcohol, if any of the family members have got a mental illness, so parents, siblings, if they've got mental illness, and the fifth one, if your mother was depressed when she was pregnant with you. All right. So all of those 10 ACEs, I want you to imagine if a child has got 6 or more of those. What kind of thoughts they might have, what kind of feelings they might have around themselves.
I get it.
You get it. So kids that have got 4 or more ACEs have got a much higher risk of getting a mental illness.
Right.
They've got a much higher risk of becoming addicts, either alcohol or drugs, because they utilize alcohol or drugs to make themselves feel better.
Escape mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. And so these kids will start with alcohol and drugs younger than the average teenager who does it experimentally. Because when we're teenagers, we all experiment, with drugs and alcohol. And then we hopefully come out of that. But these kids are doing it as a coping mechanism. So one of the coping mechanisms is self-harming.
Right.
Okay. Okay, and usually it will be girls. There are far more girls than self-harm than boys, and there will be girls that have experienced sexual abuse.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, it's because the pain is so deep inside of them
Mm,
that the self-harming is taking the pain from the inside to the outside.
right. Okay.
And that's why they self-harm. So I do a lot of training on the ACEs and self-harming and suicide. In fact, that's one of the most common things that I do is those ACEs,
Mm.
self-harm, suicide, and ligature. Those are my most common
Can,
courses.
can I say, like the self-harming thing, is that almost like a cry out for help?
Not really, because if you speak to most young people who are self-harming, they hide it. They
Okay.
don't show people.
Mm, mm,
They hide it. So it really is their coping mechanism for dealing with the internal pain.
right.
And so what I call it is a hole in the soul. Kids
Mm,
that have got these ACEs, they've got this hole in their soul and they don't know what to do with it. And they'll go to the GP, and the GP will give them maybe medicine for depression. They
right.
don't delve into, well, why are they depressed?
Mm,
Because they've had such a terrible childhood. So when this is not addressed, that's just like a sticking plaster.
mm. So the object there is to address what caused it in the first place. What is the
Exactly.
cause? And that's through what you do through conversation,
Yes, through therapy, definitely
through
through therapy.
therapy, through therapy,
Mm.
right? And okay, tell me something. Have you ever had a case where it's that bad that even you yourself have to go and de-stress?
Oh yes, I have. I have several patients that, you know, how you just think, wow, this is really, really bothering me.
Mm.
So there are two that I can think of straight off. One was a girl who was so badly sexually abused
Oh
from
wow.
the age of 8 to the age of 12.
Mm.
Um, oh, and she was around 40 when she came to me, and she'd never told anybody.
Damn, son, that's a lot of years to hold that in.
A lot
Mm.
of years to hold that in, yeah. And she was really ill when she came to me.
Mm.
And then there was a guy who was suicidal, and I just knew, you know, he's gonna take his life.
Mm.
And I got the community crisis mental health team into him several times, but eventually he took his life.
Mm. Oh man, how did you feel? That's what I'm saying. How do you cope? What is your coping mechanism? Because I'm sure it must affect you in somehow.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Mm.
But I've got a really good social support system. So I've got my husband, I've got my kids, I've got my grandkids, and I've got really, really good friends.
Mm.
So I've got a good social support system. Um, I do a lot of somatic stuff, which is one of the things that I help patients with.
Mm.
Uh, you know how I said that there's a lot of things that you can do to help yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So somatic therapy means you don't just work on the mind, you work on the body as well.
Okay. Okay. Is that part of meditation? Is
So
meditation fall
meditation
under
is
it?
one of the things, yeah.
Right. Right. Okay.
Singing is another,
Think,
humming is another. So I'll tell you why scientifically. So
please.
the largest nerve in your body
Mm.
is the vagus nerve, which goes from here all the way down through here, and it's called the wandering nerve. So it wanders right throughout your body.
Right.
So in this particular component of it, if you can activate by humming, by singing, by turning, if you can activate your vagus nerve, so
Mm.
I'll show you the trick. It's not just turning. All right, so turn your head as far as you can to the left and hold it there.
Okay.
As long as you can,
Yeah.
then
I
bring
could
it
probably
back to the middle.
I could probably hold it there for a long time anyway. But yeah. Okay.
And then to the other side, and you hold it there. And what you would do is hold it there until you feel a deep sigh or a yawn. And then
Okay.
you know you've activated your vagus nerve.
Right. Right. Oh
And
wow.
it's as simple as that.
Yeah. And then and what's that? What does that do for me then? Does
So
that
when
feel?
you activate your vagus nerve, what you're
Mm.
doing is you're calming your nervous system.
What? Serious? I'm gonna be doing that more often. So
Well,
because
it's
I'm a,
just one of the ways. It's just one of the ways.
Right.
And like with comedians, you
Yeah.
know that different people like different comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different people like different somatic therapies. So some people like to sing, some people will like to turn their head, some people will like to do tapping or drumming. So anything that's got that vibration. Yoga, very, very good for somatic therapy, for
Mm,
calming your nervous system.
brilliant.
Walking in nature, very good.
Oh, brilliant. So you've got all of this knowledge behind you, and you decided to make it a business. First of all, what's your business called? What's the name of your business?
Oh, the business is called ATICC, ATICC,
Hmm. Was there
and
is there a reason for
it's an
that name?
acronym.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
What does it
it's an
stand for?
acronym for auditing, training, implementation, counseling, and coaching.
Check you out, man. Check you out. And you started this business, and how is it going? And who are you reaching out to for in terms of
Okay.
because they're going to be your patients, ain't they? For your patient, yeah.
So I only do 1 day of therapy. I only have 1 day that I do one-to-one therapy.
Hmm.
The rest of the week, I am training or consulting in organizations. So right now, I've got a big NHS client who I am implementing a ligature management system for them. So people go
So,
into hospital
yeah,
and they put ligatures around their neck because they're suicidal.
right.
So it's helping them to analyze their data. It's helping them to look at, well, what can they do to lower their risk? It's training all of their staff how to identify, and if somebody does do that, how to get the ligature off safely.
Hmm. Okay.
So that's a big job that I've got at the moment. In terms of training, like I do a lot of training for mental health supported living, for mental health charities on childhood trauma, on self-harm, on suicide, on rescue from ligature, personality disorders, how to have a suicidal conversation. Those are kind of like my biggest training programs that people like.
And who are they targeted to?
So they're targeted to, so my biggest clients are hospitals, either
Hmm.
general acute hospitals or psychiatric hospitals, both public and private, or mental health supported living. Do you know what that is, Peter?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. So mental health supported living is that where a person has got a mental illness and they are too ill to work.
Hmm.
And so the council has to make sure, their local council has to make sure that they are looked after. So they go into this supported living, and there are support workers who work there 24/7 to ensure that they're okay.
Hmm.
So the support workers have to be trained to look after the people with these mental illnesses. Yeah, so that's,
And you're the one who does the training, yeah?
I do the training, yes.
Right.
And then other organizations are charities like Mind, like Reality, like Rethink.
Yeah.
So I train the staff on various things. And it's usually when they come across something that is really difficult for them that they haven't come across before.
Okay. What part of your job do you enjoy the most?
I love training. That's why I do most of it.
Okay.
And just training people that you can see that aha, that's why they're behaving like they are, or that's why they think like they are. Just seeing that aha and seeing that they're going to be able to put those skills into practice to help their patients or their clients.
Mm.
That's really, really, that pushes all my buttons.
Brilliant, brilliant. If I was to ask you, right, um, is there a way to stop someone getting depressed or feeling lonely? Is there a method they can do? Is there something they can do to avoid
Yeah,
actually, apart from the things that you've told me, there must be something that you can go, let me do this to
yeah,
snap out of
yeah.
whatever.
So there are preventive things, okay?
This is
And
right.
they're the most boring things that you've ever heard of
Okay.
because it's about sleep well,
Right.
exercise,
Yeah.
and eat well and have good relationships. Those
Man,
are the,
that's not boring. That's really good stuff. That's
but
good stuff.
if you say those things to people, they go, oh, that, that's
No, man, that's all about health and awareness. That's good stuff. And you're
Yeah,
saying a combination of the stuff or all of the stuff is going to be good for you. Yeah.
a combination of all of the stuff. So what
Mm.
it does is it helps your body, for the nervous system to remain in a state of balance if you do all of those things. But I mean,
Homeostasis.
do you know how? Yeah, homeostasis. That's what it's called. Nervous system homeostasis
Mm.
is what we call it.
Mm.
Yeah. But telling people that if you do that, I mean, if you tell somebody who doesn't like exercising, well, exercising is going to help your mental health. Do you
Mhm.
think they're going to listen?
So you'll be surprised, you know.
Some
You'll be
people
surprised.
will,
Mm.
some people won't. So
Mm.
exercising is again like comedy. You got to do the exercise you like. So dancing is a brilliant exercise.
There you go.
Um, doing hiking, doing whatever really pushes your own buttons, and it's
Mm.
different for everybody. So you've got to find the thing that you like.
Mm.
With diet, man, our Western diet has seriously messed up our bodies.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Seriously,
I know
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So just reducing any chemical bound food, so food that you buy
Processed,
that has got
processed foods and all that stuff.
processed food. Yeah.
Mm.
If you eat fresh food, cooked from scratch,
Mm.
um, that's much better for you. And avoid sugar. Sugar is the enemy of mental illness.
Listen
It's
to
the
this.
enemy of a whole lot of things.
You don't have to preach to me. I know this. I know this. 1 second. Lindsay, what I was going to ask you is what habits have you adopted to maintain your emotional resilience?
So one of the biggest things is I'm quite fanatical about food. So I don't have any sugar ever.
Okay.
Even on Easter, I didn't have any chocolate.
You don't have no chocolates,
I
no
didn't.
sweets, no Easter
No,
eggs.
no, I didn't. I didn't. So sugar is really, really the biggest kind of what's the word? It's the biggest culprit for lots and lots of illness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I eat a low carb, no sugar diet,
Mm.
and cook from scratch, grass fed animals, free range hens and eggs and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and free range milk.
Mm.
So I'm very, very strict about my diet.
Mm.
And then I didn't mention sleep when you asked me about what are the preventive things.
Yeah.
So with sleep, just to tell everyone who's listening, is that try and get to sleep at the same time every night. And you don't have to be like obsessive about it, around 10 or 11, whatever your good time is. And
Hmm.
then you wake at around the same time every morning. So
Okay.
give or take half an hour. And what that does is it balances your circadian rhythm. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't, but this is good
So
sense.
it's your night to day
Right.
rhythms.
Right.
Yeah. No screens for an hour before you go to bed. So the reason why is because screens have
The
got
light.
blue light,
The light. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and the blue light tells your circadian rhythm that it's still daytime.
Right. That's why you stay
And that,
awake sometimes or you find it
yeah,
hard to get to sleep because of the blue
yeah,
light. Yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
exactly. Exactly. And then for exercise, I'm not a big exercise bunny, but so I walk. I like to walk in the woods or in the fields because nature is very, very calming. So, like if I've had a really, really tough therapy day, I'll go for a walk in the woods.
Mm. Mm.
And so those are the three things that I really look after. And like I said to you before, I've got a great family support system. I've got a great friends. I love my friends. Um, so they're my support. So those are the ways. But that's not to say that I don't ever get depressed. So
Okay. So
I'm going to end with a bomb.
here we go. Here we go.
Here we go. So my daughter, my eldest daughter, when she was 12 years old, she was diagnosed with mental illness.
Hmm.
And it was around the same time that I was running that HIV unit. And so that's when I became really, really interested in mental illness.
That's what I thought.
And so, yeah. And so my darling daughter had severe mental illness all of her life. She tried to take her life several times. She was always depressed. She really, really didn't have a happy life. And then 4 years ago, she took her life.
Your daughter?
My daughter. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay.
I told you it was a bomb.
Yes, definitely a bomb. Okay.
Yeah. So for 18 months after she died, I was like a basket case.
Mm,
So even therapists, and even with all my knowledge, sometimes life throws you curveballs.
mm,
And that's when you need your social support system around you to help you through it, to
mm,
just support you until you get to the space where you think, okay, I can take on life again.
mm,
So, in that 18 months following her death, I stopped my therapy practice because it was unfair to my patients
mhm.
to not be able to be there for them.
In other words, if you're not healed yourself, how could you heal others? Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And you've learned so much from it, it seems, and now
I have.
you're giving back to the people who need.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm getting from it.
I
Yeah.
learned a lot, an
So
absolute enormous amount.
um, it seems like you're a very caring person, Lindsay, and
I hope I am.
you probably are in the right profession for yourself, and it comes across that you definitely are in the right profession, helping others to have a fulfillment in life, is what I
Mm.
would say. And well done to you, or should I say, kudos to you.
Thank
Absolutely brilliant. You do help other people, and you do help. You do help the public, or is it just a private thing that you do for hospitals, etc., etc.? I mean,
So, so I have worked for the NHS as a therapist. I was
mm,
a staff counsellor for a while, but currently I'm only in private practice, so I'm not working with the NHS. Hmm.
how does one get hold of you?
Just email me. Email is the best. No calling, because if I'm counselling somebody or if I'm training, then I can't answer the phone. So email is my best.
That's right. But what we need is your social handles, basically, or your email address, or certain things for people to get in touch with you.
All right. So should I pop that into the chat?
No, just tell it to me now, and I'll deal with it. What are your
Oh,
social
you'll go with
handles,
it.
and how do we find your company on the website, etc.?
Okay, so I've got a website which is ATICC,
Mm-hmm.
ATICC
Yep.
at no, it's Lindsay at attic.co.uk.
Okay. Lindsay at
Yeah,
attic.co.uk. Brilliant.
.co.uk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And then my social handles are LinkedIn is at ATICC PSYCH
Mm-hmm.
Health. So it's
Yep.
ATICC Psych Health.
Yep.
My Instagram is at ATICC_limited. And my website is just www.attic.co.uk. A lot of people might get confused that ATICC is not ATTIC, it's ATICC.
No worries. No worries. We'll have that sorted. Lindsay, it's been a pleasure talking to you. An absolute pleasure talking to you. Yeah. I cannot tell you how much this has opened my eyes to mental health. And you know
I'm
it's
so
right.
good.
All right. So absolutely brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Lindsay Smith, and she deals with mental health. And as you can see, she has the knowledge to deal with mental health. Thank you very much once again for appearing on Entrepreneur Insights. Lindsay, take care of yourself until we meet again.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Peter. Bye, everyone.